Welcome. Allow a full breath to be received. Nothing needs to be summoned. Nothing needs to be managed. Notice what's already here. The body breathing. The quiet space around the breath. Let the body listen before the mind explains. In the last episode, we explored something subtle. What happens when pressure is no longer present? How a certain kind of space appears. And inside that space, something very quiet returns. A kind of joy that doesn't need a reason. Today, I want to explore something that often follows that. The return of rest. Not rest as something you schedule. Not rest as something you force yourself to take. But rest as something the body begins to allow again when self-agency returns. Many people believe they are tired because they work too much. Sometimes that's true, but often the deeper exhaustion comes from something else. The body feeling that it cannot move freely, that it must constantly adjust itself to meet invisible pressures, to stay acceptable, to stay safe, to stay aligned. When the body lives like this long enough, it does something very intelligent. It stops resting. Not because it doesn't want to, but because resting would require trust. And when pressure is present, the body cannot trust. So even when someone lies down, the nervous system remains slightly vigilant. A subtle readiness, ready to respond, ready to adjust, ready to manage. From the outside, it may look like rest, but inside, the system is still working. When residues begin to resolve, something very different becomes possible. The body begins to sense that it no longer needs to hold itself in that constant readiness. Self-agency begins to return, and with it a quiet permission. Not permission given by the mind, permission felt in the body, permission to settle, permission to stop scanning, permission to be. And when that permission arrives, rest begins to return naturally, not as effort, but as function. The body knows how to rest. It always did. It simply needed to feel safe enough to do so. Something interesting happens when rest returns this way. Energy begins to reorganize. You may notice moments of stillness that feel surprisingly full, not empty, full. Or you may notice that activities that once felt draining no longer carry the same weight. Because the body is no longer spending so much energy holding invisible pressure. What once felt exhausting was not always the activity itself. Often it was the pressure surrounding the activity. When that pressure dissolves, life begins to feel different. Not necessarily easier, but lighter, more breathable, more alive. Rest is not something the mind grants the body. Rest is something the body allows when pressure is no longer there. When residues resolve, self-agency returns. And when self-agency returns, the body begins to trust again. From that trust, rest follows naturally. Not because you forced it, but because the system no longer needs to remain on guard. You don't need to apply this. Nothing needs to happen. Just notice the sensations now present when pressure isn't needed. Many people try to find rest by changing their schedule. Sometimes that helps, but the deeper rest most people are looking for is something else entirely. It's the rest that appears when the body knows it no longer has to manage. When self-agency is present, rest returns. Not as something you practice, but as something the body finally remembers how to do. Thank you for listening. This has been The Field. And wherever you are today, may the body remember that rest was never something it needed to earn. It was always something it knew how to return to. Until next time, Clarity Compass Call, link in bio.